During the evening of September 9, 2004, truck driver Joe Wilson parked his big rig truck in Crestline. He intended to spend the night there in his cab, which contained sleeping quarters resembling a small apartment. While monitoring his CB radio, he heard a woman named Brown Sugar soliciting sex. Later, Wilson encountered Brown Sugar, also known as Tanya Baker, at the truck stop picnic area. She introduced herself to Wilson as Brown Sugar and asked him if he would like to engage in commercial company. Wilson declined but bought her a pack of cigarettes. Baker followed Wilson back to his truck. After Wilson and Baker talked for a while inside Wilson's cab, Baker walked into Wilson's living quarters behind the cab. The two talked there for a few minutes until Wilson asked Baker to return to the cab. Wilson and Baker left Wilson's living quarters and talked in the cab for about an hour. Baker invited Wilson to meet her friends who were staying in a motel next to the truck stop. Wilson agreed and the two went to the motel. Wilson and Baker joined a group of 6 to 10 people at the motel. Wilson had a beer and then left after about an hour because the others were using drugs and he felt uncomfortable. Wilson returned to his truck and went to sleep. The next morning, around 4 a.m., Baker awoke Wilson by knocking on his cab door, crying. She said someone had beaten her and pleaded to let her inside. Wilson initially declined but relented and let her in. Baker went into the sleeping area and began rummaging through Wilson's belongings, saying that she was just looking at Wilson's stuff. Wilson walked from the cab to where Baker was and asked her to leave his living quarters and return to the cab. Wilson then saw defendant enter the cab. Defendant punched Wilson in the face, causing Wilson to fall on his bed. Defendant began beating Wilson and told Wilson he was going to kill him. Right after defendant's first punch, Wilson saw David Forrest enter the cab. Forrest climbed on the bed and began choking Wilson. Meanwhile, Baker rifled through Wilson's things and defendant pulled down Wilson's pants and took his money. Defendant and Baker removed Wilson's camcorder, digital camera, jewelry, cash, and other items while Forrest continued choking Wilson. Wilson passed out. When he regained consciousness, he saw Forrest handing Wilson's belongings to Baker and defendant, who were outside the truck. Wilson hit Forrest over the head with a bottle of Jack Daniels. Forrest jumped out of the truck. Wilson then grabbed a metal bar and chased defendant and Forrest down the street. The perpetrators all got away,